happen, but they convinced us, or convinced me at least, that like lots of people don't even actually really know the turn of phrase, an ounce of prevention. And so thought that a pithier name that really communicated what we do would make sense. As I said, I've been at the ounce well over 17 years at this point. I started out when we were doing the campaign for Preschool for All, coming out of direct service social work. As I said, I worked.
You're muted.
Have I been?
Oh, yep. It muted again.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Now you're good.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. If that happens again, I didn't touch anything, so I'm not sure why that happened. So good times. In any case, I came to Start Early after having done direct service social work in a Head Start funded program that focused on families experiencing homelessness. And I did that for around 14 years. So my roots are back in program, but that's a long time ago now. And the world has really shifted. And then my initial role at Start Early was when we were, those who've been around long enough, we were doing the campaign for Preschool for All. And so I actually kind of went around the state and talked about what the plan the Early Learning Council was developing. And then when we shifted to legislative action, shared more about that. And then shortly thereafter, kind of became the chief lobbyist for the ounce then. So I've spent most of those 17 years down in the State House doing that advocacy work along with some other things. And then about 3 years ago, became the vice president of the team. So now oversee a lot of our administrative advocacy and other work we do as well. So maybe you can put that, can we move ahead to that slide again, just the description of Start Early in case anybody isn't as familiar with us. And then I wonder if, could we dare doing a quick spin around the room of actual folks telling me what their name is and what their role is? I guess I'd be interested to know if you're faculty or administration, or if you've got other kinds of folks in the room. That would be helpful for me to hear in terms of the kinds of advocacy work that might fit within those roles. Is that maybe what we can do to keep this tight is if you can call on someone after you introduce yourself to keep us moving. So Ms. Lewis, you're at the top of my list. If you would kick us off.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Vernita Wycliffe Lewis, and for 19 years, I've worked with South Suburban College as adjunct faculty teaching early child development, and I'm so happy to be here this morning to be with you ladies.
Thank you. We want to call on somebody for us, Ms. Lewis?
Okay. Ms. Marilyn Tolliver? You're muted.
You can unmute yourself.
Okay, let me get unmuted. Okay, I am Marilyn Tolliver. I am faculty at John A. Logan College. I teach the early childhood education courses there, and I have done so for over 20 years now. So that's me.
Thanks. And who would you like to go next?
Tammy O'Dell is right, the next in line.
Thanks. I'm Tammy O'Daniel, and I work here at Gateways and Credentials.
Great.
Sorry, Tammy, I mispronounced your name.
That's okay.
And then
Tammy King.
So I'm Tammy King. I work at Early Childhood Professional Learning. We're a nonprofit in Arlington Heights that provides free professional development to all of our Preschool for All and Preschool for All expansion educators. And in my role, I am primarily helping move forward our work around English learners, dual language learners, multilingual learners, depending on your context and which terminology you want to use. So,
great. Who's next for you, Tammy?
Oh, I just saw Jill pop in. Hi, Jill. I haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, Tammy. It's good seeing you. I'm Jill Donnell. I'm the undergraduate coordinator and assistant director for the School of Teaching and Learning at Illinois State University.
Great. And then can you holler at who you'd like to go next?
Yes. How about Amanda Quisenberry?
I was just going to say I'll go since she just hopped on, and I'm also at Illinois State University, so that's perfect. Good morning, Jill. Hi, everyone. I'm in early childhood education at Illinois State University. I've been there 15, 16-ish years. I'm also the president of the executive board for the Division of early childhood, which is a part of the Council for Exceptional Children. And so do a lot of advocacy work related to that. And then also start with my students. One of the assignments in my classes is around advocacy as well. So trying to get our future teachers to recognize their role in advocating as well. So, good morning. Glad to be here. And I think, who is left? Is there anyone? Let me go down. I think there was one person. Oh, Eleanor.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, Eleanor, can you go? And then I think Tennille, if that's right. I'm sorry if it's not.
Yeah, my name is Eleanor Greer, and I work at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And I work one of the departments called Child Care Resource Service. I work there as a CCAP specialist, which I review applications for families to receive child care assistance. And I have been with this department for a year now.
Great, thank you. And then our last person. Yeah.
Neil? Hi, I'm at Lakeland College. I teach early childhood education and family services. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks for indulging me with that. It's always nice for me to have a sense of where people are and what they're doing. And I will just say, I think in our advocacy, we talk a lot about the workforce, and we're aware that you all are the workforce behind the workforce. And I think we'll have some, from kind of the early childhood advocate lens, more opportunities to really advocate about what else we need to actually be doing in higher ed to make sure we can generate the workforce we need. We're sensitive to and aware of a lot of the acute pressures you guys are under, and our desires to sort of diversify at the higher ed level, as we're also trying to diversify our early childhood workforce. So it's exciting to hear where you all are and all the good work that you're already doing. So thanks for coming to hear more about this. So why don't we flip one more to the agenda, and then I'm gonna switch my view for a second. So oh no, that doesn't work. I can't see you all. So I had sort of envisioned kind of our next 45, 50 minutes together, a bit of a split session, one being a little bit more of kind of a general introduction to advocacy and kind of what it is and some tips about how you do it. But then also we're really knee deep in our legislative session this year. So also giving you a little workforce related update on what's happening in our leg session. And I guess one thing that could be helpful to know just in terms of how we focus that time, maybe people either with their little raise your hand or with raising your actual hand, could you give me a sense, like if you, are you here because you're most interested in sort of the skill building and learning more generally about advocacy, or did you really come to kind of hear what's going on in Springfield? Or maybe you're sort of like, yes, both of these things. So maybe can I do a little bit of a voting? So how many of you are really here because you really want to learn more generally about advocacy and get some skills in that as your primary motivator?
Well, that's good.
Okay. And then, so then are most of you here because you're interested in hearing what's actually going on in our legislative session this spring?
Yes.
Okay. And then would some people like some of the mix? I'm going to talk.
Yes.
So that's good. Thank you. That is super helpful. So we'll talk through some of the kind of the advocacy one-on-one slides, which are slides, honestly, that we use with a lot of audiences. And so we don't need to spend a ton of time on those though, but I would love to kind of give you that ramp in, but we'll try to save time to talk about some of the bills and what's happening in Springfield. Thanks. Super helpful. Okay. So let's go ahead and flip to the next screen. So I'm sure you all have probably seen that graphic before, and it's a big part of the DNA of us at Start Early. I mean, what we know you're trying to help early childhood educators do, and what they do is trying to narrow the opportunity gap for children. They're trying to start where children are and move them along. What we're trying to do, we're sort of in parallel play with lawmakers, is close that policy gap, helping lawmakers understand what early childhood is, why it matters, and what it actually takes to produce positive outcomes for children and families, and then narrow the gap between where we're putting dollars, how we're implementing programs in a way to drive more toward what we know really works. So it's kind of a nice parallel process in that way. We can go ahead and flip then to the next. So often when we talk about policy and advocacy, people think immediately of going to the state capitol, and that's where we have most of the pictures in our slides, because that is the tangible really part of advocacy, and it is common that that's what people think of. In reality though, we have about 12 people on my team at Start Early, and there's only about the equivalent of 2 full-time people who actually do that part of the work. There's all these other kinds of advocacy that we do, and then there's around that many other types of advocacy that happen outside of advocacy organizations and policy teams, and is the kind of work that really anyone can be doing generally. And so sometimes we talk about this, particularly with early childhood professionals, because they don't necessarily think of themselves as advocates in that pure sense of the way. They I'm here because I want to help children and families. And in reality, the first type of advocacy, case advocacy, is something that in an early childhood setting, folks are probably doing almost every day, right? It's helping children get, our faculty member works on special ed. It's fighting for kids to get the kinds of services they're entitled to. It's supporting families around sort of public benefits or issues with landlords or whatever the case may be. Certainly when I work with families experiencing homelessness, that's kind of how I ended up veering over into policy and advocacy, because the whole reason my families were experiencing homelessness is because our safety net had frayed, wasn't working for them. So many barriers to obtaining the kinds of supports and services they need. So in fact, and certainly coming from my social work background, that's sort of part and parcel of the work we do. And so helping people with, especially if you're talking about your students, but for yourself as well, of really connecting to like those parts of the work you do that are regularly advocacy all the time. And honestly, don't tell anybody. It's not rocket science to do it more formally with lawmakers and people in state agencies. We have the skill. I really believe everybody in this presentation in our field has the skill set that's needed to actually advocate at that sort of systems and policy level as well. The second bullet point, the administrative or systems advocacy, I would presume a lot of you do that as well. Maybe don't sort of name it that way. That is where most of my team actually sits. And that is really the nitty-gritty work of informing how our early childhood programs are structured. Where do we prioritize funding? What should RFPs look like? What do you rank in terms of eligibility? How are we trying to blend and braid programs? What are the qualifications that teachers should have to come into the classroom? All of that work of when agencies are writing administrative rules, creating an RFP, making funding decisions. It's really the nitty gritty of those, really the rubber hitting the road about how dollars are going to be spent and directed. And we do that, and many of you probably do that around, there's tables like the Early Learning Council that is informing our state systems, PDAC, I was going to say the Quality Committee, but that's a part of the Early Learning Council. That there's a Child Care Advisory Council. There are numerous sort of formal and official tables set up in order to gather this kind of information from the field. And then there are lots of people who just do this work one-on-one through relationships you may have at the licensure department at the State Board of Ed, for example, or wherever. I would assume there's plenty of this work to do within your own institutions as well to elevate the needs of your department and your students, all that kind of work. People often don't think about media advocacy, and for folks who maybe can't do political lobbying, a really useful tool to us is when there are stories out in local papers and local media. You don't have to be lobbying to have a reporter write a story about why it's difficult for parents with young children to actually enroll in your college or in college in general. Really seeding out a conversation in the public domain that kind of lifts up and puts faces on the challenges that we're trying to solve through policy change. That's another really powerful place, actually. And also that can be highlighting really good news, I should say. It's not just about highlighting problems. It could be like, we did this policy change, and as a result of that, here's what actually looks different for the students that I teach, for example. But actually telling some of those stories, because otherwise if it's just all happening kind of behind the closed doors and the world doesn't know, it's hard to effectuate that change. And we have advocacy partners. Our partner organization, it's called Council for a Strong America, and they organize sort of unusual bedfellows like law enforcement leaders and business leaders to actually speak out in support of early childhood investments. And the media is one way that they do that all the time. They have, the police chief write a letter to the editor explaining why he sees the value for his community of actually investing in early childhood programs. And then what they do is they take those letters and they email them or they send them to that local lawmaker. And then it's no longer like the lobbyist telling that story. It is, the local police chief or the local business owner. And so that can be a highly effective strategy. And it's probably one that, to be honest, that we as the early childhood organizations do some of, but don't always have the capacity to do as much of. And it's always more valuable when it's actually generated, I think, from the local community. And then you get to the legislative advocacy, which again is the more traditional of kind of talking with and working with your elected officials. And then let's flip to the next slide, because you can, I'll say a little bit more about the legislative advocacy. And so, there is a difference, and you do have to be a little careful about veering into lobbying if you're acting in your professional capacity. United States Constitution, we are all entitled to petition our elected members of government as individual citizens on any issues we want to. You really are not constrained in any way about that. Where you can have to be a little more constrained is if you're in a position where you're acting as and being seen as the representative of your organization. You want to be careful about that, or check in with leadership about that, to just be sure that you're not crossing a line or getting yourselves inadvertently into trouble. Around lobbying as well, just to maintain sort of nonprofit tax status. For example, at Start Early, we have to make sure that we are doing lobbying within a certain percentage of our overall budget. That protects our nonprofit status. There's certain types of funding, Head Start funding, for example, where you have to really be careful about not doing lobbying on that dollar. So it can get a little bit more complicated if you're acting in that sort of official capacity. But there are lots of ways for, even if you're slightly constrained in your official capacity, there are still lots of ways, particularly to partner with those of us who do the lobbying, and to really bring your voice in. So one thing is, remember, as an individual citizen, and even referencing the work you do and why you bring a particular point of view, that is all okay. And then I think in your professional capacity, the bullet under advocacy here, educating and helping your lawmaker understand issues that matter to you, is very much still allowable, even in your professional capacity. That is the really critical and key role that you can play with an elected official. I love it. It's happened a few times in my career where I've gone into a lawmaker's office to ask them to co-sponsor a bill, and they stop and they say, let me check with my superintendent first, or let me reach out to that early childhood faculty member to see what they think. Best case scenario, your lawmaker would have a cache of folks like you guys who have built a relationship with him or her, and you can really serve as a key informant on these kinds of issues. Some local lawmakers, not so much in the Illinois General Assembly, but sometimes when we're with congressional members, because they have larger districts, might even have citizen advisory councils on different key areas that you can join and really lend your expertise. And that provision of like bringing to bear what you know and what your experiences are in your line of work to educate them is also very much an allowable thing in whatever capacity you're sort of acting as. Legally, as I understand it, not a lawyer, a social worker, the lobbying line can come into play when you're advocating for or against a specific piece of legislation or a specific budget ask. So if you're veering into that, that's when you maybe just want to just step back and think about, how am I representing myself? Who am I representing myself and? Do I need to just double check? Or in an ideal world, in some of these meetings, what you can do is partner with someone like me or my friends at Action for Children or other folks who do the lobbying. And we do this all the time, where we set up meetings, say like a site visit. We could come to your program and you're doing the tour, you've got a panel of students, you're talking about your program. And then it's actually my job to come in and say, Tammy mentioned the challenges they have with X or Y. If you were to appropriate this amount of money or to pass this bill, this would help solve some of the problems that Tammy has educated you about. So that's a nice way where we can sort of partner if you find yourself at a place where you can't maybe go in on that specific ask, but we can do that work for you. Does that make sense for folks? Any question or? Okay. All right, let's keep moving then. I said we weren't going to spend a long time on these. So again, I think I would just sort of say, I think a lot of us as individuals, I certainly felt this way before I started doing this work. Like, what do I have to actually say to my member of Congress or my, General Assembly member? I don't even really know where to start. They probably know more than you do or than I do. And the bottom line, there's a few rare lawmakers who know a lot of these things, and if they know your line of work, it's because they actually did your line of work before they became a lawmaker. But the number of things they have to attend to is if so vast and wide. If you've ever come down to Springfield and listened to debate, you can go from like a teacher scholarship bill to a roadkill bill to a procurement issue. Like, they're just all over the place. And so they, as I said, they really do often rely on sort of key informants they have in their community to feel more educated and aware of what kinds of decisions and votes they should be taking. And so I know, when I was in my social work career and I sort of was invited for the first time to meet with a member of Congress, or I went to Springfield, I think maybe was one of them. And I had some briefing and some support from the sort of official lobbyists. And I was like shocked. I was like, wow, my state senator listened to what I had to say. He had questions for me. They really do listen and take it in. And it goes a little bit against the grain of sometimes like what the public narratives around our elected officials. But I will say, 17 years working with the General Assembly, I actually have more faith in elected officials than the way I hear it talked about in the media, for example. Sure, there's some special ones out there, can't lie. But there are some really terrific public servants in elected office who want to do the right thing. And there are ones who want to do the right thing. And I may disagree that that's not the right thing, but there's a lot of commitment and willingness to act in those elected officials, and getting to know them can sort of help you see that directly. So I'll get off that soapbox. Getting forward to the next slide. So I want to just share with you. So I mentioned I got started as just a person who cared a lot about what would happen for kids and families. I got involved with a group whose name is Results. It's an international group, and their whole function is to train us as individual citizens and residents to just what's called reclaim our democracy, like act on this whole notion that we can petition our members of government, and we really have an obligation to do some of that. And so they train everyday folks all the time, and they teach you this sort of laser talk or an elevator pitch, this way of kind of organizing your thoughts. So when you happen to see a lawmaker, you're kind of prepared to say something to them and to feel like you have something to say. And I have to be honest, again, 17 years now as like literally a card-carrying registered lobbyist, this structure still works for me and resonates for me. So it's one that I like to kind of share with people. And it's called the EPIC. If you can kind of see those highlighted purple letters, it's not so easy to see, but it's just a mnemonic to help you kind of remember the order. And, I'll say it really helped me. There was a time I was at a political fundraiser, actually at a bowling alley, and I had been in this sort of volunteer role. I'd been trying to get Senator Durbin to co-sponsor a bill that would allow low-income Americans to build more assets to sort of generate a little bit of wealth. And there was no reason Dick Durbin would have an issue with that bill. I'd been calling his office and asking him to become a co-sponsor, and nothing had happened with it. So I'm here at a bowling alley hanging out and they get on the mic and they're like, hey, Senator Dick Durbin is here. And I was like, oh God, this is when people who are stronger than me would go over and actually just talk to him. But I sort of had this like pitch in my head, and I went over and talked to him directly, and he became a co-sponsor of the bill in the next week. So it does work, and it's helpful. It is helpful to have a bit of a general pitch in your head. I think lawmakers go to the grocery store. They might belong to your church. You might see them, hopefully this summer, maybe it'll be a parade or some local gathering. Like, you really can run into them in your community. And so having a basic pitch about something that matters the most to you, and I would hope maybe it's early childhood, but it could be something else, but having a little bit of sense of what would I say in that moment then allows you to actually say something in that moment, and just even start that relationship with them. So basically it's real simple. We can move, I think we have one slide for each of these points, so we can kind of move through those relatively quickly, but the E is to engage the audience. What's that little hook when you introduce somebody that would make them want to talk to you a little bit more? And I will tell you, the most important piece with a lawmaker is to say, I'm a constituent. I live in your district, or I work at this program that serves students in your district. Like, what is that connection? If you happen to know a little bit about them and something they care about, you can also kind of use that as a hook. I know it sounds terrible, but I know people who work on child advocacy, and if they know somebody cares about animal rights, they find a way to pivot something like that. I know nobody likes comparing animals to actual human children, but for animal people, if that's the way in. So at the very least, just being able to identify yourself as a constituent, but also if you can connect on something matters to them, that's great. So you get them to talk to you, introduce yourself. Then the next one is to P, state the problem. Were you aware that a lot of early childhood professionals would like to go back and get a degree, but they have transcript debt from multiple schools that keeps them from being able to actually complete their degree? And you don't have to, it's not a dissertation. You really, it's an elevator pitch. You're going from, the state capitol only has really four floors. You're going from 1 to 4. So, keep it concise. But what's the quick statement of the problem or the thing that you care about most that you'd like to see fixed? And then the I for the epic, if you can flip to the next, is to inform about potential solutions. So INCRA, or in Illinois, because they don't probably know what INCRA is. Sorry for my friend at INCRA. They may not know what INCRA is, but in the state of Illinois, we're using federal dollars to actually clear some of that small debt from these sort of transcript holds. And we're finding that people are actually able to go back then and complete their degree, which helps them, not only serve children and families better, but also gain better economic security for their families. We have a solution. We might not have a solution, but you also might have ideas about what that solution would be. God knows on our workforce issue, there's a lot of ideas. We still haven't fixed the problem. And so it's also a chance to put forward your own solution that you might have in mind. That is often how bills get filed, because a constituent has brought an idea to a lawmaker. All right, so we've engaged them, we've stated the problem, we've informed of a solution, and then the C is to call to action. So this is important. So in the sort of example I've been building, the answer would be, would you support putting more funding into this debt reduction program so we can serve even more students? We know it works. We want to reach more people. Or honestly, if this is just sort of your first time talking to them, the call to action could be, I'd really love for you to come and meet with a couple of my students and let them tell you about how that debt reduction helped them. Or even just, I'd love to have you come and learn more about the early childhood program at Lakeland College. I'd love to have, or would you come and speak to the women's group at my church? Or could we just have another time to meet and sit down and talk more in depth? The call to action can be simple. It doesn't have to be a bill number or a budget ask or any of those things. It really could be about a bit of a relationship development in that way. So that's been a really useful mnemonic for me. It also works sometimes if you're trying to compose a letter or an email, where you can just sort of structure and be concise in that way. If people have ever come to our advocacy or other lobby days in Springfield, if you're talking to them in the Capitol on one of those days, it's super chaotic. You don't have a lot of time. So this kind of thing becomes really useful. If you're seeing them in the community, you hopefully will be able to get on their calendar and talk a lot longer. But again, this is a good way to just sort of, let's get them, put something out there, and then how do we want to connect and continue this conversation? Let's flip one more. I think there's, so a couple of ways, like I mentioned, you know, the legislative session generally is sort of January through May. They're back a little bit in the fall, but there's a lot of time. I'm sorry, that was the Illinois General Assembly calendar. The congressional calendar is a little crazier, but there's generally a week or two each month that your Congress members are also back home in the district. And you can always call and just ask for a meeting, ask to get on their calendar, call the office, invite them to an event, anything like that. Obviously you can send letters, make calls, do emails. Certainly we have, I hope some folks here are on our email list. I'm sure you're on others where you can do the really easy click through email. That's great. I also love when people develop that personal relationship and actually call offices. I think these days that carries a lot of weight. Like it used to be, I would only pick up the phone for my mother. So we don't do that very often anymore. And so actual calls and honestly, actually handwritten letters are kind of powerful because like a click through email is quick and easy, right? Like I could do 5 of those actions and that's a good thing. And they do count those. I've certainly seen lawmakers, assistants count those things up. But the more personal and deeper connection obviously is also, I think, a little bigger bang for your buck. Do something, do what actually feels comfortable for you. But if you're interested and willing and actually trying to build a little more of that relationship, that is a terrific thing to do. We talked about inviting legislators to program and classes. I forgot, it was Amanda who said that she gives this assignment. I've had a few other, I used to speak to a class at Millikan also where there'd be an assignment to write a letter to your lawmaker. I think you guys are in a powerful position to help early childhood educators see how much their perspective and their experience actually would be important for lawmakers to hear. I'm just the hired gun. It's personal and I'm passionate and I care about it, but at the end of the day, they know I'm a paid lobbyist. It's entirely different when it's coming from you or some of your students. And then I mentioned that our Advocacy Action Center, certainly other Illinois Action for Children, Latino Policy Forum, our other advocacy partners also have email lists. We'll often have up there sort of sample talking points or a fact sheet, things that if you are talking about something that maybe you know the problem well, but you're less familiar with the solution, you might be able to pull some content that could be helpful to you in crafting a message as well. Okay, I said I wasn't going to talk so much. Let's keep moving through this. Just one thing, I think as with everything else, we've had to do lobbying and advocacy the last year virtually. I think there'll be some element of that engagement with lawmakers that will continue. Checking out your lawmakers' use of social media is a good way to engage with them anymore. You can ping them in a direct message or comment on posts they might be making. They have been doing a lot of virtual town halls and meetings. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them continue some of that, even as they return to some in person. Some of you may have submitted a witness slip when bills are in committee where you can weigh in support or in opposition of a bill. And again, you can either do that officially as your organization or as a citizen. I think we hope to actually this summer film a little video talking. It's a little wonky how that works, but I think we'd like to do a video. And so we can try to remember to share that back with INCRA about how to actually do that, which is a nice way to be able to get your voice up into actual legislative hearings. Anyway, just in general, how are you staying in touch with people in this environment and asking your lawmaker how they prefer to be? Some lawmakers will say, I'll give you my cell number, text me if you have thoughts. Other people will say, call my office and talk to my scheduler. Like they're going to run the gamut, but ask them. Okay, let's keep going here. I think the next one is just, I wanted to show you. So we always do every 2 years when there's a new General Assembly, we do a new lawmaker event, usually at EduCare in West DuPage, so they can like tour and see kids and families and we can show them, what are the elements of quality? Well, this looks like this meeting and every other meeting we've had the last year, but it was really productive and a good conversation. We met with a bunch of new lawmakers and learned a lot about a connection many of them actually have back to early childhood. So it really can be just as effective in many ways. So that's how we're doing lobbying these days either in the box. So, all right, let's keep moving forward. So moving on to what's happening in Springfield. So this week is the first week back from their spring break. And so at this point, we are very close to Bill's, let me think, I'm sorry. Bills I think by next week will have to be out of the first chamber they were filed in. So if I filed a bill in the House, If I want my bill to stay alive, it needs to pass the House to go over to the Senate, I think by the end of next week, around that timeline. So that's sort of the halfway point. And then it's like a sprint for the next 6 weeks to the end of May. And yes, the other thing they have to do that they haven't really started doing is actually create the state budget in those 6 weeks. So it's going to be a wild ride. And of course, you know, it's remote legislating. They are back more in person. They've started to allow some lobbyists in the building, but not really the general public. And you have to have COVID test each day to be in, all those kinds of things. But we're going to be in a kind of frenetic and intense point of time at this point for the next 6 weeks. Okay, let's move ahead. So we won't have to walk through these, but in general, I just wanted you to see the main priorities that we are working on in this legislative session. They're primarily budget requests, but also a couple of bills. We are generally supporting some or opposing some of the workforce bills you'll hear about. We don't have a workforce bill that we organizationally are leading on, but a lot of this and even the full budget ask are very much an agenda that's jointly developed by Illinois Action for Children, with Latino Policy Forum, with a lot of our legislative advocate friends. The one thing that Start Early is really taking the lead on is in these budget requests, really saying clearly, you have got to focus the first dollars on compensation for our workforce. We keep saying we have to do it. We don't do it. We're really pressing lawmakers to say that should be where the first dollars go, whether that's in our State Board of Ed funded programs. We also have the early intervention and our home visiting programs and childcare. We're really pushing that really hard in our budget asks. Okay, we can move forward to the next slide. So in the handouts, that's in that Dropbox file, I shared what is actually just a report that's auto-generated by a bill tracking system that we have. I did try to pair, so that's the larger list of workforce bills that I think are alive right now. The fun thing about bills, you can think they're dead and then they are zombie bills and they come back from the dead. And so you never quite know. So it's a bit of an art, not a science. But I didn't give you everything because there are so many bills filed that are clearly not going anywhere that sometimes we can get very focused on a bad bill, and it's what's not, you can't see it on paper, but we just know from conversations that bill is not going anywhere. Maybe the lawmaker has told us, I don't intend to move that bill. So in that report, if you look at it, at some point is the larger list of things we think are still alive that are maybe ancillary to early childhood or not focused on early childhood, but where we want to watch for any potential crossover. But I did try to pull up the ones that are still alive and that are sort of most focused and have an impact in early childhood. And I put the community college BA bill up first, knowing full well that there's probably a range of opinions about that bill in this group, let alone the larger group. But I think it's a really important conversation we're having. This bill was in committee just this week, actually, and it was an hour-long debate. And I will say it was probably one of the most substantive, thoughtful debates I've seen in the General Assembly, particularly around these kinds of issues. And so a lot of really important issues and questions on both sides of the argument, all that kind of stuff. But it's really presenting the opportunity to talk about some of the challenges we hear from the field about being able to complete bachelor's degrees. And so to have that opportunity to actually, raise things about what it means to have to figure out credit for prior learning and all that kind of stuff talked about in a legislative setting. Where that bill stands right now is, this was again, I think it was Tuesday night, it was in committee, and there was, a lot of support for the idea. There was a lot of desire expressed by lawmakers to make sure that we're not replacing the need to have community colleges and four-year institutions actually still continue to kind of partner and work together. But I think also the acknowledgement of the fact that we've kind of worked at this articulation problem for a really, really long time, and we still are just having a lot of students experience a lot of barriers to degree completion. So Senator Christina Pasion-Zayas was the lead on this, and she committed to meeting once more to bring all the stakeholders together to see if we could come to an agreement on a bill that could be satisfying to everybody. Sometimes when nobody's satisfied, they say you've reached the right compromise, right? But so there will actually be a meeting, and we're attempting to see if we can get to some common ground language and continue to move this bill forward. And that has to happen in relatively quick order, because as I said, I think by next week, then this bill would need to be voted on in the Senate. So that's where that bill stands right now. And that is a bill that the early childhood advocates have been supporting and advancing. Then I referenced, and I think in the PowerPoint and the Dropbox, I hyperlinked these bills. And so you could actually go and read them yourself if you would like to. You'll notice some of them have a Senate bill and a House bill. If I've hyperlinked both of them, I think both of those bills are currently alive and moving. In this one case, you can see, I don't think the House bill on the community college BA is going to move further, that we're going to move the Senate bill. That's why the difference there. The second bullet point is a bill to actually gather more information about challenges that students who are also parents are gathering. You know, a lot of states use a lot of the campus federal dollars and have a lot of official supports through that funding. And we actually don't collect a lot of data as a state to really quite know what the experience is and how many there are. And so there's a couple of our advocate friends who are working on this bill so we can have a clearer picture of that and think about some of the added supports that those students might need. And then, so House bill, so that is a bill again that the early childhood advocates are supporting and advancing. House Bill 2374 is probably the one that's garnered the most attention. Sometimes this is referenced as the ILDOC bill. I don't know what it's called in you guys' circle. This is a bill that has been initiated by the Illinois Directors and Operators of Childcare, ILDOC. It's their response to the teacher shortage, which their proposal would actually be to have qualified teachers only hold the level 1 credential. And then it would also remove the requirement to have a director credentialed person, a director qualified person at open and close. And, you know, this is in response to some of the, you know, the real pressures that program and operators are finding around the staffing shortage. But obviously the early childhood advocate position on this is we need to actually make some change on the problem in the pathways and get people moving to the credentials they really need to have to be prepared to work with children and to stay in the field because they feel prepared for the work they're doing and not reduce qualifications. So there was a hearing on this a couple of weeks ago. And so this is a little bit of breaking news and I'm not exactly sure where we're at on it, but there was in that the legislators heard the staffing shortage issue. We had good support though for the fact that reducing qualifications is not the way to solve the problem. There was again an agreement to have some further discussion to see if we could get to some agreement on a bill and a commitment to bring that bill back to the committee before it moved any further so we could all talk about it again. That bill has now been amended, but they also did another procedural move that is making us a little concerned that they might not be bringing that bill back to committee, which is problematic. And so we're actually, like, as we speak, trying to understand what's going on. But this would be one that keep an eye out for sort of action alerts and opportunities to weigh in. Because if it doesn't come back to committee, then we need lawmakers to vote no in the House. Or then if it were to pass the House, we have to repeat this process in the Senate, and we would want a lot of people again to weigh in about their concerns. We'd have a second chance to stop that in the Senate or to have further conversation at least. So we kind of thought that one was on the back burner, and now literally as of last night, it seems to the lawmakers continuing to advance that bill. The chief sponsor in the House is Anthony DeLuca, who's someone's in the south suburbs, but he's a bit in the southwest suburbs. But if that name rings a bell and he's your lawmaker, could let him know you'd like him to not move that bill. And then Senator Jacek Barrickman has Senate Bill 496, and this is another one we think it is not moving. But it actually would rewrite the endorsement grade spans, which I'm sure at least some people on this call probably helped work on. So, you know, there's a large stakeholder process to set the new grade spans. And this would change them again. And I think the state board is opposed to that. A lot of people are opposed to that, and he's heard that. So we're hoping he's not going to continue to move this bill, but it's another one to keep an eye on. do we want to just talk about some of these bills if you guys have questions about any of them? Okay. All right, we can go to the next slide. So one thing I actually would love to ask you guys a question. There's been a number of things that have passed in the last few years that were in response to challenges we actually did hear from the field. And then, you know, often there's like a rule writing process, like it can take a long time before it actually plays out in implementation. But I always sort of wonder, it's a lot of work to pass a bill. And then I wonder if knowing how critical the early childhood faculty are to really accessing and advising students about their pathways and, you know, working around some of the barriers, I always sort of wonder how and if this information actually ever gets down to you all, to where you can actually think about it in your work with your students. You know, so we had allowed, actually the first bill I ever passed allowed for an early childhood student, if they were working as an assistant teacher in a childcare center and they needed to do student teaching, and if there was someone who could appropriately supervise them in that setting, that bill allowed them to like shift into that teacher role for their student teaching experience, but continue getting their paycheck in their assistant role, so that people weren't leaving one early childhood program to like go work for free in another setting. So we passed that like 16 years ago. And then that provision was removed when they rewrote all of the licensure pieces. And we didn't realize it at first, but we recently in the last few years did reinsert language that not only allows for paid student teaching, but also just reaffirms that student teaching is allowed in both school and community-based settings for birth to 5. And so is that, I don't know if that's something people have had students avail themselves of, or if that was something you were sort of aware of was allowable. But I wanted to at least mention it because sometimes I'm not sure, again, if we get that word out. A couple of years ago, legislation passed that eliminates the basic skills test. I think there was fairly widespread agreement that it wasn't a measure of an ability to become a teacher, and instead was filtering out particularly teachers of color and things like that just aren't helpful to the field. And again, not for the right reasons, not because it was an indication of their teaching ability. I will say, I think one of the conversations I think that will continue to happen over the next few years, every year there are also bills filed to eliminate the core, the content tests and the Ed TPA, although that's not in law, but the idea of an actual assessment of teaching ability. And so I think that's another place where we've got a wide range of opinions and beliefs about that. But I think there'll be a lot more conversation about what the role of some of those things are. And just from an equity perspective, make sure we are actually assessing for the right things that relate to whether or not someone's going to be effective in the classroom, or if we're just creating barriers that aren't helpful. And I don't know enough to know what's true about those things. I just know that that's a conversation being had in the legislature a lot. And then actually just in January, people may have seen in the news that the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, starting last fall, really wanted to sort of seize the moment we were having in the country to actually talk about systemic racism and equity, and pull together really an amazing package of 4 very large omnibus bills. I've never seen this play out in all my years. Like I was like, this isn't going to work. This isn't how we do bills in Illinois. But Senator Kim Lightford stuck to it and did it. And so there were 4 pillars, one being economic development, health, education, and the criminal justice reform. And so they passed 4 very large bills around those issues. We were very honored to really be invited. Thanks, Senator Lightford's been a longstanding supporter of early childhood. And so she wanted to make sure that was a part of their education pillar. And so a lot of us, again, working in partnership, created largely the section called the Early Childhood, the Early Childhood Workforce Act puts in a lot of language about our compensation challenges and the racial inequities in that, the challenges with access to higher ed and credential and degree attainment. We also have language in there that is going to extend early intervention services into the summer months for kids who turn 3 in May, so they don't undergo a big gap in services. There's language that's being acted on around increasing mental health consultation and sports supports for the pyramid model. Trying to think of them all, codifying the kids' assessment into statute. So we worked very much on that package of early childhood things together. But these other two, the top two bullets under this bill, were really worked more by the K-12 advocates, but would be benefit. There's some targeting of the minority teachers scholarship, particularly toward Black men. And if they also get some increased funding, also creating a pool for bilingual candidates of color as well. So that's an exciting addition. And then did remove the GPA requirement for the entry to the alternative licensure pathways, which again was another one of those barriers that didn't really have any correlation to whether or not somebody was going to be effective with kids, but was just serving to actually block people from having the chance to go in and attain their degree. Oh, two other things I realized I left out of that were, well, I guess just one. We also extended the Grow Your Own program into community-based early childhood settings. I don't know how much that's actually happening, but in statute, it is a setting where that's allowed to happen.
Thank you for sharing those. I was going to just chime in. You had kind of asked our perspective on things. And I know, I mean, like I can speak, and I think Jill maybe can even more from ISU's perspective, but I think a lot of times when these types of bills get passed, there's a lot of confusion. And so it's always helpful when we can have organizations like yours that can give us sound bites or tip sheets or pieces of information that we can share with students, because students oftentimes come to us, probably more often their advisors, but at ISU, we're not one and the same. And so whenever we can get that kind of information, it's super helpful. And so thank you for doing that work and helping with that. But just to let you know that that's sometimes, like they'll hear things like, whenever anything like this passes, there's lots of rumors, you know what I mean? And so like they hear this bill about getting paid for student teaching and they suddenly think they're going to get paid for student teaching. And we're like, actually, no, you probably never are. I mean, you just could, and so just all those things, the more you can help with that, the better.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Amanda. That was sort of always my fear. And then I'm familiar of like the, is it ILCATE? I can never ever, the faculty group, is that a good place to direct those kinds of resources and then get them, as a faculty, you all are so diverse and all over the state, and how we make sure we get some of that communicated out.
Sure. I think so. And then just even like through this group, through, like the folks who are in this meeting through Gateways, I think is also helpful too.
Yeah. And I often wonder, that's why I hope we can get more of two-way conversation going, because this is a big body of work. I am absolutely not an expert. I'm a total novice. I've learned a lot in the last few years, but there are a lot of things sort of we don't know at our level that I bet you did. There was a lot of confusion, for example, with the advocates about the federal Teach scholarships and whether or not early childhood folks were eligible. We kind of checked in the policy lanes and the answer is yes, but it felt like that was something that maybe wasn't commonly understood. And I can appreciate, as complex as it is, your poor financial aid advisors who are advising every student and if it's hard for us to navigate our own system, it's really hard for them. And one of the things I know we have talked about, but haven't had the bandwidth to yet do is a bit more of a schematic almost of like, the student walking in the door and like, are you seeking your Pell? Then some financial supports would be helpful. Yeah, kind of that matrix. I mean, ideally, and I hope with some changes at the federal level, they'll simpler and bigger pots will become available that are less of this hoop jumping. But in the meantime, we would want our students to be able to avail themselves of these things. And so, maybe it would be fun perhaps if there was like a small group of people who maybe wanted to help inform some of what what would be helpful in that way, or show you some of our fact sheets and say, would this be helpful to students, or how else would you structure it? But I really like the idea of creating some of a food feedback loop with you all to help us make sure we're like, get this information out, right? Because otherwise it could be 2 years to like ISB issues a rule, and then that has to wind its way through your institution and all that stuff. And honestly, to hear more directly about what the challenges are from you all, so that we're actually solving the right problems too. I know all of us who do the advocacy work really want to solve actual problems and not create new ones. And sometimes we create new ones while we're, so that's great.
I wanted to ask a question about, or maybe some clarification about the paid student teaching. If the student is already working in a childcare program or school system, is that the student that we're talking about? Because some colleges and universities have their own childcare labs, and typically those settings are not, that we're not paying them. Yeah. I no longer have a child care lab anymore since they discontinued that at my college. So I'm just wondering, I'm glad Amanda brought that up. I'm just wondering how this is working. So what are the guidelines for who is getting paid student teaching, or the approval of the setting, or what, how does it work is what I wanted to know. And also the elimination of the basic skills test. Was this test renamed the proficiency test, or is there no testing at all now? What is the current situation for the student requirements? So do you have a fact sheet on this? As Amanda was saying, a summary of the facts.
So that bill just passed in January. So I would expect that nothing has changed yet on the entry test. And others, if others know better, chime in. I don't know that ISB's made any decision or announcement about that, but that's a good flag that when that happens, hopefully soon, yeah, we need to end soon, but that would be a good thing we could share out with you once we know some more about what's actually happening with that. But because the bill just passed in January, and in fact, it wasn't signed until mid-February, then it will take some time for some of those decisions to be made and some rule making or communication out. So that's one we'd have to follow up to see what's actually happening with that. I'm not familiar with the proficiency test. So if that's another one, I can ask.
I thought some years ago it was a renaming of the test.
Maybe so. So maybe that's.
But the other thing is this apprenticeship thing. What is the difference between the paid student teaching and apprenticeship? Isn't that kind of what an apprenticeship is? You learn on your job and you get paid. It's a job.
Yeah, if I can say, on the paid student teaching, the bill is pretty general. It just sort of says you can be paid in your student teaching setting. It's allowed. Earlier, the idea really was around people already working in a setting. When we passed that bill like 15 years ago, it is very general and broad. I don't actually think there's even rules written about it. So my guess would be, and again, I would rely on you all, is that higher ed institutions would have some flexibility on that. And so it could be someone who continues being paid at their previous level, or it literally could be, I mean, school districts are probably better poised to do this in community-based settings, but that they could identify funding and be able to pay a stipend or a wage to someone for that student teaching time. I think it's generally pretty broad. But I'm more familiar with the practice as it happened back in the day, which really was about people staying in their current job role and then just being able to step into the student teaching for the period of weeks with the correct supervision. And on apprenticeships, that's actually an area I'd like us to do a lot more work on. I mean, I think you're right. Like in a general definition, a paid student teaching experience is an apprenticeship. There are also sort of specific apprenticeship programs that may have other sources of fundings and structures around it. We're looking into federal WIOA money that I know, like Kate Connor at City, they use that for a lot of their programs. It doesn't get used a lot, where you could have federal funding to support early childhood teacher prep rather than always using early childhood money to fund that. And they use apprenticeships in a very specific way too. But you're right, it's all essentially the same idea of learning on your job and being able to be paid. But we confuse it by creating specific programs sometimes and then calling them apprenticeships in a very distinct way. I don't know if I'm helping. It's confusing, and I'm learning all this as we go too. But I think we all believe strongly that those kinds of programs are going to be really important for the incumbent workforce. And so that's why there's so much attention to them right now.
Can I jump in right quick? I had to walk away. This is Vernita Wycliffe Lewis, and I live in Anthony DeLuca's community. So if you would provide me with the script, I will be more than happy to contact him today.
That's great. We're gonna have to get out of here. I wonder if you could, you have my email on one of the last screen there. I wonder if you could shoot me your email.
Okay, it's on the last screen.
Can you flip ahead to my contact information's at the very, there you go. Gasner at start, oops, back one. Gasner, IGASNER at startearly.org. And I'm happy to continue with some of these other questions if people want to reach out to me individually to talk about any of this stuff, or there are other tables where you'd want to have a different conversation with other colleagues. Happy to dig into this, and really happy to have smart people help me as I'm learning this to think about
leading edge stuff.
Yes.
It's really, really exciting.
Yes.
All right. So we are currently on a break. I went ahead and put the 1025 interest sessions up there. So I'm gonna go ahead and